A quiet life and a new neighbor. Adrian's mornings typically began with the gentle hiss of the kettle and the turning of a page. He liked the quiet hum of his apartment, a sanctuary built of worn leather and the comforting scent of old paper. Each volume on his shelves represented a different journey, a different voice whispering tales from across time and space. He wasn't a recluse, not precisely, but the company of authors often felt more engaging than the hustle of the outside world. His days unfolded with a pleasing predictability. A morning spent translating obscure Latin texts for Professor Albright, a simple lunch of soup and a sandwich, then perhaps a leisurely afternoon lost in a forgotten classic or a modern philosophical treatise. Evenings often found him in his armchair, a mug of chamomile tea steaming beside him, a good book open in his lap, the soft glow of his reading lamp, the only illumination. It was a life he had carefully curated, a quiet tapestry woven with threads of thought and imagination. Today, however, the tapestry threatened to fray. The low rumble started just as he was contemplating the finer points of Kantian ethics. It grew, an insistent vibration that rattled the window panes and sent a shiver through the floorboards. Adrian peered through the lace curtains. A colossal moving truck, the kind usually reserved for transporting entire estates, was slowly backing into the driveway of the house next door, a house that had stood vacant for the better part of a year, its overgrown garden a testament to neglect. He watched, fascinated, as two men in faded blue overalls wrestled with the truck's ramp. They weren't alone. A third figure emerged from the cab, stretching his arms above his head, a casual, almost unconscious display of strength. This man was taller, broader, and moved with an easy confidence that seemed to ripple through the morning air. Adrian felt a sudden, unexpected jolt, a quickening in his chest he couldn't quite account for. He ducked back from the window, a faint flush creeping up his neck. He tried to return to Kant, but the rhythmic thud of boxes hitting the ground next door was a persistent counterpoint to the philosopher's measured prose. By lunchtime, a small mountain of cardboard had accumulated on the neighbor's lawn. Adrian, ostensibly fetching the mail, found himself lingering on his porch, a book clutched in his hand as a flimsy excuse. As he turned to go back inside, a voice deep and resonant cut through the sounds of moving. "Hey there, need a hand with that?" Adrian turned, startled. The tall man from earlier was striding across the lawn, a wide, friendly smile on his face that seemed to light up the already bright afternoon. He was even more imposing up close, with a strong jawline, warm brown eyes, and hair the color of rich coffee. He wore a simple t-shirt that stretched across a muscular chest and broad shoulders. Adrian, suddenly acutely aware of his own somewhat rumpled cardigan and the slightly oversized book in his grip, felt a familiar wave of shyness wash over him. "Oh, no, thank you," Adrian stammered, gesturing vaguely at the book. "Just getting the mail." The man chuckled, a hearty, genuine sound. "Right. But that box, there." He pointed past Adrian to a large, heavily taped cardboard box that Adrian had been struggling to maneuver from his entryway into his study for the better part of an hour. It was filled with his heaviest reference books and had proven stubbornly resistant to his efforts. "Looks like it's got a few too many ideas in it for one person." Adrian glanced at the box, then back at his new neighbor. "It's a bit heavy." "I can see that," the man said, his smile unwavering. He was closer now, and Adrian caught a faint scent of something clean and outdoorsy, like fresh wood and sunshine. "Let me get that for you. New neighbor, new good deed, right? I'm Marcus, by the way. Marcus Thorne." He extended a large, calloused hand. Adrian took it. Marcus's grip was firm, warm, and reassuring. "Adrian Finch," he replied, his voice a little softer than he intended. "Adrian, nice to meet you." Marcus's gaze was direct, friendly, and lingered for just a moment too long, sending a small, unexpected flutter through Adrian's chest. Before Adrian could fully process it, Marcus had released his hand and was already bending over the offending box. "Which way to the ideas?" Marcus asked, a playful glint in his eyes as he easily lifted the heavy carton, making it look as light as a feather. "The study," Adrian managed, leading the way, feeling a strange mix of relief and a rather uncharacteristic warmth spreading through him. He found himself subtly adjusting his cardigan, a small, almost imperceptible gesture of self-consciousness. Marcus followed, his presence filling the usually quiet hallway, with a vibrant energy Adrian wasn't accustomed to. The scent of him, clean and subtly masculine, seemed to follow Adrian as well, a new, intriguing note in the familiar symphony of his home. The broken lamp. The scent of old paper and the gentle hum of the refrigerator were Adrian's usual companions. That evening, however, an unexpected chill had settled in the air, a premonition, perhaps, of the disruption to come. He was reaching for his well-worn copy of the Elegies of Propertius, nestled precariously on a teetering stack beside his favorite armchair. The stack, a testament to years of literary acquisition, swayed with the slightest nudge. His elbow brushed against the base of the Tiffany-style lamp, a treasured gift from his grandmother, its stained glass shade a mosaic of emerald and sapphire, and a sickening lurch. Time seemed to slow. Adrian watched, helpless, as the lamp, with a delicate, almost mournful grace, toppled. A sharp crack echoed through the sudden silence of his living room, followed by the tinkling cascade of glass shards onto the polished oak floor. The beautiful emerald panel, the very heart of the lamp's glow, lay fractured, irreparable. A wave of profound sadness washed over Adrian, a feeling disproportionate to the broken object itself. It wasn't just a lamp. It was a connection, a memory, a symbol of the quiet constancy of his life. Now, even that seemed to be shattering. He knelt, surveying the damage, the sharp edges of the broken glass mirroring the jagged pain in his chest. A faint, almost imperceptible tremor ran through his hands. He spent the next hour, a meticulous, almost desperate effort, trying to piece it back together. He retrieved his small box of tools, tweezers, a bottle of superglue, and a roll of electrical tape that usually saw action only when a frayed charging cable needed a temporary fix. With painstaking care, he gathered the larger fragments, their edges glinting under the overhead light, now harsh and unforgiving without the lamp's warm diffusion. He tried to align them, to force the broken bits into their former shape, but the delicate solder had snapped. The lead came twisted. Each attempt was futile, the glass refusing to knit back together, mocking his efforts with sharp resistance. A tiny sliver pricked his finger, a pinprick of crimson blooming against his pale skin. He stared at it, then at the mangled lamp, a choked sigh escaping him. It was truly, utterly broken. Defeated, he pushed the pieces into a dusty box from the back of his closet, the task feeling heavier than any translation he'd ever tackled. He left the room in shadow, opting for the solitary glow of his desk lamp in his study. The silence of the house felt heavier now, charged with the absence of that familiar, comforting light. Later, much later, Adrian found himself standing by his living room window, a cup of lukewarm tea forgotten in his hand. The streetlights cast long, skeletal shadows across the lawn. He watched the subtle sway of the oak trees, their branches bare against the encroaching twilight. His gaze drifted, drawn, almost involuntarily, to the brightly lit windows of Marcus's house next door. Through the expansive bay window, he could see Marcus, a vibrant silhouette moving with effortless energy. He was arranging books on a shelf, his broad shoulders easily visible even from this distance. Adrian felt a fresh pang of despondency. Marcus, with his robust vitality, seemed so utterly capable, so completely unburdened by such mundane catastrophes. He was building, creating, making new. Adrian, meanwhile, was presiding over a small personal ruin. He hadn't realized how long he'd been standing there, a figure of quiet contemplation, until Marcus paused, turning his head slightly. Their eyes met, or rather, Marcus's gaze seemed to find Adrian through the pane of glass, across the expanse of lawn, and through the gathering gloom. Marcus offered a small, hesitant wave, a gesture Adrian was too lost in his own melancholy to return. He simply stared, a forlorn figure framed in his own window, the shattered lamp a heavy weight on his spirit. A moment later, Marcus, a concerned frown now etched on his face, started to move toward his front door. A helping hand. The tap on the door was soft, tentative, yet it reverberated through Adrian's chest with the force of a gong. He swallowed, the taste of ashes coating his tongue. He knew who it was. Marcus, the man who had, only moments before, been a vibrant counterpoint to Adrian's quiet despair, now stood on his threshold, his presence a physical weight. Adrian pulled the door open, just a crack at first, then wider. Marcus stood there, a tool belt slung low on his hips, smelling faintly of sawdust and something clean and masculine. His dark eyes, usually so bright with a kind of restless energy, were softened with concern. "Hey, Adrian, right?" Marcus's voice was a low rumble, surprisingly gentle. "I couldn't help but notice. The lamp. And you looked pretty cut up about it." He gestured vaguely towards the shattered pieces on the floor. "I'm good with my hands. If you'd let me take a look, I might be able to piece it back together for you." Adrian's first instinct was to refuse, to retreat into the familiar solace of his solitude, to lick his wounds in private. But the offer, so unexpected, so genuinely kind, disarmed him, and the thought of that lamp, his grandmother's lamp, staying broken, was a fresh stab of pain. It's a Tiffany," Adrian managed, his voice a reedy whisper, "very old. I don't think anyone can fix it." Marcus's eyebrows, thick and dark, rose slightly. "A challenge, then. I like challenges." A warm, easy smile spread across his face, and Adrian felt a peculiar warmth bloom in his own chest, chasing away some of the chill of his misery. "No harm in trying, right? Worst case, it's still broken. Best case, you get your lamp back." The logic was undeniable, and the thought of Marcus, so capable and confident, bending his will to the task, was strangely comforting. Adrian stepped back, a silent invitation. "Come in, then," he said, his voice a little stronger now. "It's quite a mess." Marcus stepped over the threshold, bringing with him an aura of competence and a faint, pleasant scent of cedar. Adrian's small apartment, usually a haven of ordered quiet, suddenly felt different. Smaller, perhaps, or more keenly observed. He became acutely aware of the stacks of books, the worn armchair, the half-empty teacup on the coffee table. These were the trappings of his life, laid bare for this vibrant, unfamiliar man. Marcus's gaze swept around the room, taking it all in with an appreciative nod before settling on the shattered lamp. He knelt down, his broad shoulders filling the space, and Adrian found himself watching the flecks of muscle beneath his shirt. "Wow," Marcus murmured, his voice laced with a genuine respect. "This really is a beauty. A lot of individual pieces here, but the glass itself looks mostly intact. Just a matter of patience and the right adhesive." He carefully picked up a shard, examining the intricate pattern of the leaded glass. "Looks like the solder gave out in a few places too. Probably just old age." Adrian stood awkwardly, unsure of what to do, how to act. He was used to being alone, to the quiet rhythm of his own thoughts. Marcus's presence was a vibrant counterpoint, a bass note vibrating through the stillness. I don't even know where to begin," Adrian confessed, gesturing helplessly at the scattered pieces. Marcus looked up, his dark eyes meeting Adrian's. There was no pity there, only a steady, reassuring calm. "You don't have to. That's what I'm here for." He reached into his tool belt and pulled out a small specialized kit, setting it carefully on the floor beside the lamp. "First thing, we need to clear a workspace. Got any spare tables or even just a large flat surface?" Adrian pointed to his dining table, usually reserved for solitary meals and stacks of research papers. "There. It's a bit cluttered." "No problem," Marcus said, already rising to his feet. "Let's make some room." As Marcus moved toward the table, Adrian found himself following, drawn by a curiosity he hadn't felt in years. The air in his apartment, usually still and heavy with unspoken words, now hummed with a new, unfamiliar energy. It was a strange, unsettling, yet not entirely unwelcome sensation. He watched as Marcus, with a surprising gentleness for such a large man, began to clear away the detritus of Adrian's quiet life, making space for something new to be built, something broken, perhaps, to be made whole again. Laughter and lingering. The rhythmic snip-snip of wire cutters punctuated the quiet of Adrian's living room, a sound both foreign and surprisingly soothing. Marcus, perched on a low stool Adrian had retrieved from the kitchen, worked with an economy of motion that spoke of practiced skill. Tiny shards of iridescent glass lay scattered on the old blanket Marcus had carefully spread on the floor. catching the afternoon light like fallen jewels. His large hands, surprisingly nimble, manipulated intricate pieces of copper foil, solder, and what looked like a miniature soldering iron. The faint metallic tang of flux began to drift through the air, replacing the stale scent of old books and dust. "See this bit?" Marcus gestured with a pair of tweezers, holding up a delicate curve of emerald green glass. "This is the tricky part. It's not just about fitting it. It's about making sure the lead lines flow like they're supposed to. Otherwise, the whole pattern looks off." He spoke with a focused intensity, his brow furrowed in concentration, yet his voice was light, almost conversational. Adrian, initially hovering, had retreated to his armchair, a safe distance from the potential for accidental interference. He watched fascinated as Marcus meticulously cleaned an edge, then applied a thin strip of copper tape. Marcus's presence, though still a disruption, no longer felt like an invasion. Instead, it was captivating. "I once tried to fix a stained glass window in a church," Marcus mused, not looking up from his work. "Thought it would be a piece of cake. Ended up gluing my thumb to a piece of a saint's halo. Had to explain that one to Father Michael. He just stood there, looking at me with this beatific smile like I was testing his faith." Adrian let out a startled laugh, a genuine, uninhibited sound that surprised even himself. It felt rusty, unused. Marcus glanced up, a grin spreading across his face, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "It's true. Took me a good 10 minutes and half a bottle of nail polish remover to get free. The saint, by the way, was St. Jude, patron saint of lost causes. Seemed fitting." More stories followed, each more absurd and charming than the last. Marcus recounted a disastrous attempt at building a treehouse that ended with him upside down in a wheelbarrow, a harrowing encounter with a flock of geese while delivering a custom bird bath, and the time he accidentally painted a client's prize-winning show dog purple while trying to touch up a garden gnome. His narratives were punctuated by a self-deprecating humor that made Adrian's chest feel unexpectedly light. Adrian found himself leaning forward, elbows on his knees, completely engrossed. He asked questions, something he rarely did with casual acquaintances, and Marcus answered readily, elaborating with vivid detail and expressive gestures. The lamp, slowly but surely, began to re-emerge from its shattered state. Marcus worked with an almost paternal tenderness, coaxing each piece back into place, soldering with a precision that belied his boisterous tales. And then the client, a very prim woman with a poodle even primmer than she was, just stared at the dog, then at me, then at the dog again, Marcus recounted, carefully positioning a deep crimson petal. She just kept saying, my Penelope is Violet." I thought I was going to lose the commission, but then she burst out laughing, said Penelope had always needed a bit more pizzazz, ended up hiring me to do her whole garden. Adrian laughed again, a deeper, more resonant sound this time. The sound resonated in the quiet room, startlingly pleasant. He hadn't realized how much he'd missed the simple joy of shared laughter. Marcus's stories weren't just funny. They painted a picture of a life lived fully, spontaneously, completely unlike Adrian's carefully ordered existence. And yet, for the first time in a long time, Adrian didn't feel a pang of regret or envy. He simply felt present. As the sun began to dip lower, casting long shadows across the room, a significant portion of the lamp's dome had been reassembled. The broken edges were gone, replaced by smooth, shimmering lines of solder, binding the kaleidoscope of glass back into a cohesive whole. The faint scent of flux had given way to a cleaner, almost metallic smell, mixed with something indefinably warm and human. Marcus's subtle cologne, perhaps, or simply the scent of his presence. "Almost there," Marcus murmured, leaning back slightly to assess his work. He looked at Adrian, his smile soft. a hint of something unreadable in his gaze. You know, I've actually had fun today, Adrian. More fun than I expected, anyway. Adrian felt a flush creep up his neck. Me too, he admitted, the words feeling strangely bold. Thank you, Marcus. Truly. For everything. Marcus just nodded, that easy smile returning. My pleasure. We'll finish this up tomorrow, once the solder sets properly. And maybe you could tell me some stories then? He picked up a stray piece of emerald glass, turning it between his fingers. I bet you've got some good ones in all these books. His eyes, warm and direct, lingered on Adrian for a beat longer than strictly necessary, and Adrian felt a peculiar warmth bloom in his chest, a sensation both unfamiliar and undeniably welcome. Small excuses. The last sliver of stained glass clicked into place with a satisfying finality. Marcus, his brow furrowed in concentration, wiped a faint smudge from the leaden frame with a practiced thumb. Then, with a flourish, he plugged the lamp back into the wall socket. A soft, jewel-toned glow bloomed, chasing the shadows from Adrian's study and painting the worn spines of books in hues of emerald and sapphire. The amber dragon, once fragmented, now coiled majestically around the base, its eyes seeming to glitter with renewed life. There, Marcus said, stepping back, a broad grin splitting his face. Good as new, I'd say. Maybe even a little better, if I do say so myself. Adrian gazed at the restored heirloom, a warmth spreading through him that had little to do with the lamp's gentle illumination. He reached out, tracing a finger over the smooth, cool glass. It's perfect, Marcus. Truly. I don't know how to thank you. Marcus shrugged, picking up his tools and neatly stowing them in his worn leather bag. Just glad I could help. It was a nice challenge, actually. A good way to unwind after a day of unpacking. He straightened, his gaze lingering on Adrian for a moment before he offered a casual, almost reluctant smile. Well, I should probably let you get back to whatever it is you do in here. Adrian found himself strangely reluctant to see him go. The quiet would return, heavy and familiar, but now tinged with a new awareness of its emptiness. Right. Of course. Thank you again. Marcus nodded, already at the door. He paused, his hand on the frame. You wouldn't happen to have a cup of sugar, would you? Just realized I'm completely out, and I was planning on baking some cookies. Adrian blinked, surprised. Sugar? Yes, I believe I do. He led Marcus to the kitchen, retrieving a large bag from his pantry. Marcus accepted it with another grateful smile, his eyes twinkling. You're a lifesaver, Adrian. I'll bring you some cookies when they're done. The next day, true to his word, Marcus appeared at Adrian's door with a plate piled high with still warm chocolate chip cookies. Their scent filled the hallway, rich and comforting. Payment for the sugar, he announced, a playful glint in his eyes. Adrian, caught mid-paragraph in a dense Latin text, found himself smiling again. You didn't have to. Nonsense. A good neighbor always shares. Marcus lingered, accepting a cup of tea Adrian offered. He sat at Adrian's kitchen table, recounting a humorous anecdote about a stubborn piece of furniture in his new house. Adrian listened, entirely captivated, the forgotten Latin text lying open on his desk. The cookies were delicious, and the conversation flowed easily. Marcus eventually left, promising to return Adrian's sugar when he'd replenished his own supply. But it wasn't long before another knock sounded at Adrian's door. Adrian! Quick question, Marcus began, a wrench in his hand this time. You wouldn't happen to have a spare adjustable spanner, would you? My box is still buried in one of these moving crates. Then it was a request for a lighter to start his new grill. Then an inquiry about the best local takeout spot. Each excuse was small, easily dismissed, yet each one brought Marcus back to Adrian's threshold. Adrian found himself anticipating the soft rap on his door, the sound of Marcus's distinctive voice. His quiet days, once so meticulously ordered, were now punctuated by these unexpected, yet increasingly welcome interruptions. He noticed how Marcus's presence filled the space, how his laughter echoed off the high ceilings, how the air in his study seemed to hum with a different energy after Marcus had left. Adrian, who had always meticulously guarded his solitude, found himself missing it less and less. Sweet gestures. The crisp morning air, usually a solitary pleasure for Adrian as he sipped his tea and reviewed the day's translations, now carried a new anticipation. He'd barely uncapped his fountain pen when a light rap sounded at his door. Marcus, a wide, easy smile already in place, stood on his porch, a small paper bag clutched in one large hand. "Morning, Adrian," he boomed, his voice a warm rumble. "Hope I'm not interrupting your scholarly pursuits." Adrian, caught off guard but not entirely displeased, managed a small smile in return. "Not at all. Just getting started." "Good, because I had an extra. Blueberry. Still warm." Marcus extended the bag, and the sweet buttery scent of baked goods wafted towards Adrian. "From the bakery down the road. Thought you might appreciate a proper breakfast for once instead of whatever it is you usually eat." He winked. Adrian felt a blush creep up his neck. His usual breakfast was indeed a pragmatic affair of plain yogurt and unsweetened tea. He took the bag, the paper surprisingly warm against his fingertips. "Thank you, Marcus. That's very thoughtful." "Don't mention it," Marcus said, already turning to descend the steps. "Just thought of you. Look." The muffin was indeed still warm, bursting with plump blueberries, and a crumble topping that dissolved on his tongue. It was a simple gesture, yet it filled Adrian with a warmth that spread beyond his stomach. The unexpected kindness, the thought behind it, resonated deeply. He found himself lingering over the last crumbs, a small smile playing on his lips. A few days later, the afternoon sun cast long shadows across Adrian's study, painting his books in a golden hue. He was engrossed in a particularly dense passage when a familiar knock broke his concentration. Marcus again, this time holding a steaming mug. "Afternoon, Adrian. Just brewing some of my special chai. Thought you might want to taste." He held out the mug, and the air around them filled with the rich, aromatic blend of cinnamon, cardamom, and ginger. "It's got a kick, but in a good way." Adrian hesitated, then took the mug. The ceramic was warm, almost hot in his hands. He inhaled deeply, the spices a complex, comforting embrace. "You brew your own?" Marcus nodded, his eyes twinkling. "Got a whole cupboard of spices. It's an art form, really. Takes patience." He leaned against the door frame, his presence filling the space with a quiet energy. Adrian took a tentative sip. The tea was robust, sweet without being cloying, and indeed had a subtle, warming heat that spread through him. It was unlike any tea he'd ever tasted, a world away from his usual bland Earl Grey. "This is remarkable." Marcus's smile broadened, genuine pleasure radiating from him. "Glad you like it. Figured you, being a man of refined tastes and all, would appreciate the nuance." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, Adrian savoring the tea, Marcus simply observing him. The unspoken connection, woven from shared laughter and small acts of kindness, was growing stronger, more tangible with each passing day. It was an unfamiliar sensation for Adrian, this gentle invasion of his carefully constructed solitude. But he found, to his surprise, that he welcomed it. He found himself looking forward to the next knock, the next unexpected offering, wondering what small, sweet gesture Marcus would conjure next. Each time, it felt less like an interruption and more like a cherished punctuation mark in the quiet rhythm of his days. Closer on the couch, the scent of cinnamon and cardamom had become a welcome prelude to Marcus's afternoon visits. Adrian found himself anticipating the gentle knock, the easy smile, and the latest iteration of Marcus's culinary experiments. One Tuesday, after a particularly potent chai had warmed Adrian's insides, Marcus gestured vaguely towards the living room. "You know, I've been meaning to catch up on some movies," he said, his eyes scanning Adrian's modest collection of mostly art house films and documentaries. "Anything good you've seen lately?" Adrian, who usually reserved evenings for dense academic texts, felt a flicker of something new. I mostly read," he admitted, a faint flush creeping up his neck. Marcus chuckled, a warm, resonant sound. "Well, then it's high time we broadened your horizons. My place is still a bit of a disaster zone, but your couch looks inviting." He paused, a question in his gaze. "Mind if I impose for a bit? We could order some takeout, too." The casual invitation, devoid of any expectation or pressure, felt surprisingly appealing. "Certainly," Adrian managed, a small, genuine smile touching his lips. He was surprised by how readily he agreed, how quickly the thought of a quiet evening with a book dissolved into the prospect of shared company. Later that evening, the living room, usually a sanctuary of quiet contemplation, hummed with a different energy. The aroma of pad thai mingled with the subtle scent of Marcus's aftershave. Adrian found himself perched on the edge of his small two-seater sofa, a classic French drama flickering on the screen. Marcus, with his broader frame, took up the majority of the remaining space, his knee almost brushing Adrian's. As the film progressed, their proximity became a quiet, constant presence. Adrian, hyper-aware of Marcus's every shift, felt a strange current pass between them. His arm, resting on the armrest, occasionally made fleeting contact with Marcus's bicep, a solid, warm anchor. Each touch, though accidental and brief, sent a subtle tremor through Adrian. He found himself subtly adjusting his posture, not to create distance, but to maintain that barely there connection. He'd never experienced this kind of physical intimacy with another man, or indeed, with anyone outside of the most perfunctory of social interactions. It wasn't overtly sexual, not yet, but it was charged with an unspoken awareness, a shared space, a shared experience, a quiet understanding developing between them. Adrian noticed the subtle scent of Marcus's skin, a clean, earthy aroma that was entirely distinct from his usual woodsy cologne. Midway through the film, Marcus let out a soft sigh and leaned back, his shoulders settling against Adrian's. It was a natural, unforced movement, born of comfort. Adrian's breath hitched, but he didn't move. He felt the warmth radiating from Marcus, the solid presence against his side. A wave of unexpected contentment washed over him. This wasn't the frantic, unsettling feeling of past attractions, but a deep, pervasive sense of ease. He felt safe, cherished even, in this quiet, unassuming way. He risked a glance at Marcus, whose eyes were fixed on the screen, a thoughtful expression on his face. The soft glow of the television illuminated the strong line of his jaw, the slight stubble, the curve of his lips. Adrian felt a warmth spread through his chest, a feeling he hadn't recognized before. It wasn't just comfort. It was something deeper, a sense of belonging he hadn't known he was missing. When the credits rolled, Adrian found himself reluctant for the evening to end. The silence that followed was different from his usual solitude. It was a comfortable, shared quiet. Marcus stretched, his arm brushing Adrian's once more, a deliberate, lingering touch this time. "Good film," Marcus murmured, his voice a low rumble. He turned, his gaze meeting Adrian's. There was an unspoken question in his eyes, a mirroring of the profound shift Adrian felt within himself. The air between them thrummed, thick with unspoken possibilities. Adrian just nodded, unable to articulate the sudden rush of emotions. He knew, with a certainty that both thrilled and terrified him, that his solitary life was irrevocably changing, and he wasn't sure he wanted it back. A lingering touch. The movie nights became a regular fixture, But it was what happened after the credits rolled that truly reshaped Adrian's evenings. Marcus no longer made a hasty exit once the film concluded. Instead, he'd lean back into Adrian's sofa, his broad shoulder a reassuring presence just inches away, and they would talk. About the film, about their days, about the obscure historical facts Adrian unearthed, or the latest project Marcus was tackling in his garden. The conversations flowed easily, unhurried, often stretching until the streetlights cast long, ethereal shadows across Adrian's living room floor. Adrian found himself anticipating these evenings with an intensity that surprised him. The quiet hum of his apartment, once a comfort, now felt like a prelude, a space waiting to be filled by Marcus's resonant voice and warm laughter. His work, usually a singular focus, now punctuated by subconscious checks of the clock, a silent countdown until the familiar knock would sound at his door. It wasn't just the company, it was the way Marcus listened, truly listened, his gaze steady and engaged, making Adrian feel seen in a way he hadn't experienced before. One particularly blustery Tuesday, after a documentary on ancient Roman architecture had concluded, the conversation drifted to Adrian's latest translation project, a collection of rediscovered Hellenistic poems. Adrian, usually reserved about his work, found himself detailing the nuances of a particularly challenging passage, the delicate balance between literal meaning and poetic intent. He gestured animatedly, a rare display of passion, and a lock of dark hair, dislodged from its usual neatness, fell across his forehead, partially obscuring his vision. Marcus, who had been listening with his customary attentiveness, reached out. It was a slow, deliberate movement, his hand rising with a gentle inevitability. Adrian's breath caught in his throat, his heart thrumming a frantic rhythm against his ribs. Marcus's fingers, calloused from work but surprisingly soft, brushed against Adrian's temple, the lightest of touches. He didn't just push the hair back, he lingered, his thumb stroking Adrian's skin for a fleeting moment, a spark of electricity arcing between them. The touch was brief, almost imperceptible, yet it sent a jolt through Adrian's entire being. It was a caress, intimate and unexpected, that bypassed all his carefully constructed defenses. He froze, every nerve ending suddenly hyper-aware, the warmth of Marcus's skin a brand on his own. The air in the room thickened, charged with an unspoken energy. Adrian's eyes, wide and startled, met Marcus's. There was an unreadable depth in Marcus's gaze, a flicker of something raw and intense that mirrored the sudden tempest in Adrian's chest. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't awkward but heavy, pregnant with unspoken emotions. Adrian felt a blush creeping up his neck, a warmth that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. He could feel his pulse hammering in his ears, a frantic drumbeat against the backdrop of the quiet night. When Marcus finally withdrew his hand, the absence of his touch was almost as potent as its presence, leaving Adrian feeling strangely bereft, a phantom sensation lingering on his skin. Marcus cleared his throat, a soft rumble that seemed to break the spell. "It's getting late," he said, his voice a little rougher than usual. He stood, gathering his empty teacup, his movements a shade less fluid than normal. "I should let you get some rest, Adrian." Adrian could only nod, his voice lodged somewhere in his throat. He watched as Marcus moved towards the door, the easy camaraderie of their earlier conversation replaced by a palpable tension. As Marcus paused on the threshold, he turned back, his gaze sweeping over Adrian one last time. "Good night, Adrian," he murmured, his eyes lingering on Adrian's face. "Good night, Marcus," Adrian managed, the words barely a whisper. The door clicked shut, leaving Adrian alone in the sudden silence. He raised a hand to his temple, touching the spot where Marcus's fingers had rested. The ghost of that touch, gentle and electric, still lingered, a searing reminder of the unexpected intimacy that had just unfolded. He sat there for a long time, the quiet no longer comforting, but an echo of the profound shift that had just occurred within him. His solitary world, once so predictable, now felt irrevocably altered, brimming with a new, thrilling, and terrifying possibility. Garden whispers and wondering looks. The late afternoon sun, a muted gold through a sheer cloud cover, draped Adrian's small backyard in gentle warmth. The air offered a blend of damp earth and the subtle, sweet perfume of a neighbor's jasmine. Adrian, trowel in hand and petunia seeds at the ready, knelt by a neglected patch of soil. A familiar flutter stirred in his chest as Marcus, punctual as ever, emerged from the side gate, cradling a flat of vivid impatience. "All right, Professor. Ready to trade academia for actual dirt?" Marcus's voice, a comforting low rumble, still managed to send a tremor through Adrian. He looked up, shading his eyes, and met Marcus's gaze. A new lightness danced in Marcus's eyes today. An unburdened joy Adrian found himself involuntarily absorbing. "As ready as I'll ever be," Adrian replied, a rare, genuine smile touching his lips. He watched as Marcus knelt beside him, broad shoulders effortlessly filling the small space, making the garden feel unexpectedly intimate. Marcus carefully set down the tray of flowers. Their fiery reds and deep purples splashed vibrant contrast against the muted greens and browns. "These are resilient little guys," Marcus said, plucking one of the potted impatiens. "They'll really liven up this corner." He demonstrated how to gently release the plant from its container, careful not to disturb the delicate root ball. Adrian observed, a quiet contentment settling over him, finding peculiar satisfaction in the simple shared task. They worked in companionable silence for a while, the only sounds the rustle of leaves, the distant trill of birds, and the soft thud of turned earth. Adrian meticulously dug a small hole, his movements precise, almost delicate. As he reached for the impatiens Marcus had just freed, their hands brushed. It was a fleeting contact, just the backs of their fingers, yet an electric current seemed to shoot up Adrian's arm. A sudden, intense warmth suffused him, his breath catching. He risked a quick glance at Marcus, whose hand paused for a microsecond before continuing to place the flower. Adrian's own hand trembled slightly as he firmed the soil around the plant's base. He tried to concentrate on the task, on the cool earth against his skin, but the memory of that touch lingered, a potent sensation. A blush crept up his neck. He hoped Marcus wouldn't notice. He busied himself with another patch of soil, replaying the moment in his mind. Was it accidental? Or had Marcus's hand lingered a fraction too long? The ambiguity only heightened the swirling anticipation within him. When he looked up again, wiping a smudge of dirt from his cheek, he found Marcus already watching him. But it wasn't the usual friendly, open gaze Adrian had grown accustomed to. This look was different. Marcus's eyes, usually so direct, were softer now, almost pensive. There was a quiet intensity there, a depth Adrian hadn't seen before, as if he were perceiving Adrian not just as a neighbor, but as something more, something cherished, perhaps. Adrian's breath hitched again. He felt completely exposed under that gaze, yet not in a way that made him want to withdraw. Instead, he felt a strange pull, a desire to lean into it, to decipher its meaning. It was a look that spoke of discovery, of a burgeoning realization, mirroring a nascent feeling Adrian was only just beginning to acknowledge within himself. Marcus held his gaze for a beat longer than usual, a subtle shift in the air between them. Then, with a slow blink, the intensity receded slightly, replaced by a familiar warmth, though the echo of that wondering look remained in Adrian's mind. "That's a good start," Marcus said, his voice a little softer than before, gesturing to the newly planted flowers. "We'll have this place looking like a botanical garden in no time." Adrian nodded, his voice thick with unsaid words. "Yes," he managed, his gaze still lingering on Marcus's face. searching for a return of that profound expression. He knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that something significant had just passed between them, unspoken, yet undeniably powerful. The garden, once just a patch of dirt, now felt like fertile ground for something entirely new. Confusion and silence. The faint clink of the trowel against ceramic echoed a seismic shift within Marcus. He'd felt Adrian's feather-light fingertips brush his own, not a jolt of static, but a deeper current, surging through his arm to settle, warm and insistent, in his chest. Then, Adrian's wide, luminous eyes had met his, posing a silent question Marcus couldn't quite decipher, yet felt acutely. He'd stared back, an instinctive response to the raw vulnerability he saw, and the equally raw, unfamiliar stirring within himself. This wasn't mere attraction, which he'd known before as a sharp, immediate pull. This was different, slower, more profound, as if a missing puzzle piece had perfectly clicked into place. The sensation was thrilling, terrifying, utterly disorienting. Later that evening, the last petunias tucked into their new homes, Marcus paced his living room. The scent of damp earth clung faintly to his clothes, mingling with a lingering trace of Adrian's presence. He'd always been so certain of himself, his desires, his life's trajectory. Women, laughter, an easy charm. But Adrian was a quiet storm, a subtle disruption that had, without fanfare, rerouted his internal compass. The thought of Adrian, beyond neighborly camaraderie, sent a strange knot of anxiety twisting in his gut. A man who prized control, who understood the world through clear parameters. He found this burgeoning affection boundless, undefined, utterly beyond his grasp. It was exhilarating, yes, but deeply unsettling. A cold dread seeped in, whispering doubts he wasn't ready to confront. What did this mean? What would people say? More importantly, what would he say to himself? He decided abruptly to create distance, just for a few days, to regain his bearings, to dissect this dizzying cocktail of emotions before he risked damaging their fragile budding connection, or worse, damaging himself. The following morning, Adrian woke to an unnerving silence. The usual hum of Marcus's routine, the faint scent of coffee, the distant clang of tools was absent. He told himself Marcus was simply busy, an early start perhaps. But as day bled into evening, the silence persisted, growing heavier, more palpable. He found himself wandering aimlessly, a book unread, his gaze repeatedly drawn to the window facing Marcus's. The once comforting view now felt like a gaping void. Without Marcus's easy presence, his days felt muted, a film without sound. The meticulously organized world Adrian had cultivated now seemed stark, almost sterile. He tried to distract himself, diving into a dense translation, but the words blurred. His mind replayed moments, Marcus's booming laughter, the crinkle around his eyes when he smiled, the quiet intensity of his gaze in the garden. Each memory, once a source of quiet joy, now carried a faint echo of longing, a dull ache in his chest. He missed the unexpected knock, the casual offer of help, the simple, comfortable weight of Marcus's presence. The space Marcus had filled, so gradually and completely, was jarringly empty, leaving Adrian with a profound, unsettling loss. 3 days passed in this strange, uncomfortable vacuum. Adrian's neatly ordered life felt untethered, adrift without the constant grounding pull of Marcus's proximity. He found himself listening, straining his ears for any sound, any sign, but there was nothing. Only unsettling quiet and growing confusion. Had he imagined the spark? Misinterpreted the look in Marcus's eyes? Or had he, in his quiet way, somehow driven Marcus away? The question swirled, unanswered, leaving him adrift in a sea of silent uncertainty. Missing his warmth, the quiet in Adrian's apartment, once a cherished refuge, now pressed in on him, a stifling shroud amplifying the void left by Marcus's abrupt departure. The effortless cadence of their shared laughter, the comforting rumble of Marcus's voice spinning a daily anecdote, his light-hearted, often teasing queries about Adrian's latest translation, all had vanished, leaving a profound emptiness that resonated deep within Adrian's chest. He drifted through the rooms, propelled by a strange aimlessness. The armchair by the window, typically his sanctuary, now presented a bleak, uninviting aspect. He reached for a familiar Horace, but the elegant Latin verses blurred before his eyes, his thoughts, untethered and rebellious, circling back to Marcus. He pictured the furrow of Marcus's brow concentrating on a complex repair, the quick flash of his easy smile, the mingled sense of sawdust and something quintessentially Marcus that always clung to him. Adrian had always prided himself on his intellectual rigor, his capacity for total immersion in his work, yet now, even the most intricate linguistic puzzles failed to capture his attention. He'd gaze at a particularly challenging phrase, his mind replaying a snatch of conversation, a shared glance, the fleeting warmth of Marcus's hand. The house, usually alive with the soft hum of his own reflections and the rustle of turning pages, felt vast and desolate. He remembered Marcus's boisterous arrival mere weeks ago, a vibrant burst of energy and light in Adrian's otherwise meticulously ordered existence. The way Marcus had filled the space with his presence, with an easy confidence Adrian had found both perplexing and undeniably captivating. Now, silence reigned supreme, broken only by the distant city sounds, ever present, yet now underscoring the profound absence. Adrian attempted to reread a chapter from a beloved Roman history, a detailed account of the Punic Wars. But Hannibal's strategic genius felt utterly trivial. His eyes kept straying to the antique clock on the mantelpiece, the one Marcus had admired, tracing its brass casing with a knowing touch. Adrian recalled the lingering brush of Marcus's fingers, and a faint flush warmed Adrian's cheeks. He had dismissed the unfamiliar sensation then, attributing it to Marcus's easy physicality. Now he knew better. He yearned for the casual contact of Marcus's arm as they bent over a blueprint, the shared grin over a particularly witty observation, the way Marcus's presence infused the mundane with unexpected vibrancy. He missed the quiet comfort of simply having Marcus there, a steady, grounding presence in his formerly solitary world. A heavy, unbidden sigh escaped Adrian. He was unaccustomed to such emotional turbulence. His life had been a meticulously constructed edifice of routine and scholarly pursuits, a fortress against the unpredictable currents of human connection. But Marcus had, with an almost effortless grace, dismantled those defenses piece by careful piece, leaving Adrian exposed and vulnerable to emotions he hadn't known he possessed. He closed the book, setting it aside with a soft thud. The truth, stark and undeniable, settled over him like a sudden chill. He missed Marcus, not merely a convenient repairman, not just a pleasant acquaintance. He missed him with a depth that both surprised and unsettled him. He missed his laughter, his warmth, his sheer, undeniable vitality. He missed Marcus, and the realization, raw and aching, was a testament to how profoundly his heart had shifted. The return. The scent of sawdust and fresh-cut cedar, usually a comforting balm, felt like an accusation. Marcus sat in his workshop, the rhythmic rasp of a plane against wood unheard, his hands idle. Days had blurred into a monotonous cycle of restless nights and hollow days since he'd last seen Adrian. He'd tried to lose himself in his craft, to drown out the insistent clamor in his mind with the familiar demands of creation, But every chisel stroke, every sanded curve only brought Adrian's face into sharper focus. Adrian, with his precise gestures, the way his eyes lit up when discussing some obscure historical detail, the unexpected vulnerability that had bloomed between them like a rare, delicate flower. Marcus had fled, a primal urge to escape the unfamiliar intensity of his own emotions driving him. He'd told himself it was for the best, that he was protecting Adrian from what? From his own confusion, his own burgeoning feelings that felt too vast, too consuming to categorize. He'd always known what he wanted, or so he'd thought. His life had been a series of clear, well-defined paths, and none of them had ever veered into the quiet, book-lined world Adrian inhabited. He dated women, beautiful, vibrant women, and the connections had been straightforward, predictable. This was different. This was a current that pulled him under, not gently, but with a powerful, undeniable force. He'd spent countless hours replaying every shared glance, every accidental touch, every shared laugh, the way Adrian's hand had brushed his when passing a book, the sudden warmth that had spread through him, the easy silence that had settled between them, more comfortable than any conversation he'd ever had. The memory of Adrian's small, hesitant smile when Marcus had shown him a new piece of his work, a genuine appreciation that had resonated deep within him. He tried to rationalize it away, to dismiss it as mere friendship, a fondness for a new neighbor. But the emptiness in his chest, the constant ache proved otherwise. He missed the quiet hum of Adrian's presence, the subtle shift in the air when Adrian entered a room. He missed the unexpected intellectual sparring, Adrian's sharp wit disguised behind a shy demeanor. He missed the feeling of being seen, truly seen, for the first time in a long time. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. He couldn't stay away. The thought of a life without Adrian, without the possibility of whatever this burgeoning, terrifying, exhilarating thing was, felt unbearable. He was a craftsman. He built things. He fixed things. And what he'd broken by his sudden retreat was a connection he now knew he desperately needed. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, Marcus pushed himself up from the workbench. His hands, usually so steady, trembled slightly as he ran them through his hair. He needed to be honest, not just with Adrian, but with himself. He didn't know what to say, how to articulate the chaotic tangle of emotions that had driven him away and now pulled him back. But he knew he had to try. He walked out of his workshop, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the yard. The familiar path to Adrian's door felt like a journey into uncharted territory. He reached the polished wood, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He raised his hand, hesitating for a fraction of a second, then rapped his knuckles firmly against the door. The sound echoed in the sudden silence, a testament to his resolve. He waited, his gaze fixed on the door, a nervous tremor running through his broad shoulders, a fierce determination etched on his face. He was here. He wasn't leaving again. A confession and a smile. The crisp autumn air, usually a welcome companion to Adrian's solitary walks, felt sharper, colder than usual. He had fallen into the old rhythm of his life, a pattern of quiet contemplation and scholarly pursuits, but it was a rhythm punctuated by a gaping silence, a void where Marcus's boisterous laughter and easy presence used to be. Every turn of a page, every sip of tea felt incomplete. His mind, once a sanctuary of ancient texts and philosophical musings, now replayed countless moments with Marcus, the shared warmth of the fire, the scent of sawdust and cedar, the comfortable silence that spoke volumes. A knock at his door, tentative yet firm, startled him from his reverie. He looked up, a familiar ache blooming in his chest. He knew that knock. For a moment he hesitated, a surge of adrenaline mixing with a potent dose of apprehension. Had he imagined it? No. There it was again, more insistent this time. He pushed away from his desk, the worn leather of his chair groaning softly in protest. His heart hammered against his ribs as he crossed the room, every step feeling impossibly heavy. He opened the door, and there he was. Marcus, standing on his porch, a slight breeze ruffling his dark hair, the familiar warmth of his eyes, a stark contrast to the coolness of the evening. Adrian's breath hitched. Marcus looked tired, perhaps, but there was a resolute glint in his gaze that Adrian hadn't seen in weeks. "Adrian," Marcus began, his voice a low rumble, softer than usual. Can I come in?" Adrian simply nodded, stepping aside, his voice seemingly caught in his throat. Marcus entered, bringing with him the faint, comforting scent of wood smoke and something uniquely him. The silence that descended was different from the comfortable one they once shared. It was heavy with unspoken words, with the weight of absence and uncertainty. Marcus turned to face him, his hands clasped in front of him, a rare, nervous gesture. I know this is sudden," he started, his gaze sweeping over Adrian's face, lingering for a moment on his lips before flicking back up to his eyes. "And I know I haven't been myself lately. I've been an idiot, Adrian, a complete and utter fool." Adrian's brow furrowed, a flicker of hope warring with a deep-seated fear of further disappointment. He remained silent, allowing Marcus to continue, to untangle whatever knot had formed between them. Marcus took a deep, shuddering breath, his shoulders rising and falling. I missed you, Adrian," he said, the words barely above a whisper, yet they resonated through the quiet room, echoing in Adrian's suddenly sensitive ears. "God, I missed you. Every day, every hour, it felt wrong, empty." He paused, his gaze locking with Adrian's, an intensity in his eyes that made Adrian's knees feel weak. Then Marcus took another breath, a much deeper one this time, as if steeling himself. His eyes searched Adrian's, a raw vulnerability etched onto his features. "Adrian," he began, his voice gaining a newfound conviction, "I think I'm in love with you." The words hung in the air, potent and unexpected, yet also, in a strange way, utterly inevitable. Adrian's mind reeled, a kaleidoscope of emotions swirling within him. Surprise. Yes, a profound, breathtaking surprise. But underneath it, a wave of pure, unadulterated joy washed over him, banishing the lingering shadows of doubt and sadness that had plagued him for weeks. The ache in his chest, so long a dull throb, dissolved, replaced by a radiant warmth that spread through every fiber of his being. He felt his lips curve upward, a slow, unbidden smile blooming across his face, a smile that reached his eyes, crinkling the corners. It was a smile born of relief, of happiness so profound it felt almost overwhelming. He looked at Marcus, truly looked at him, seeing the nervous tremor in his hands, the vulnerability in his gaze, and Adrian's own heart swelled with an answering affection, a love that had grown silently in the quiet corners of his soul. "Marcus," Adrian finally managed to whisper, his voice thick with emotion, his smile widening, bright and genuine. The light in his eyes mirrored the nascent hope in Marcus's. He didn't need to say anything else, not yet. The smile, the warmth, the sheer, undeniable happiness radiating from him said it all.